Jesse Betcher. Ron Buckholz.
Here.
Tweed Schumann. Stacy Hessel.
Here.
Michael Maestri.
Here.
John Righeimer.
Okay, so we do have a quorum. We have 4 voting members present. State of the committee hearing procedure and statement of hearing notice. The full statement of committee and hearing procedure document, including directions for individuals wishing to speak at a public hearing to be conducted at this zoning committee meeting, are available at the front of this room next to the agenda in today's meeting. The statement of committee and hearing procedure document is hereby incorporated into the record for this committee meeting. Any public hearing conducted at today's committee meeting has been published as a Class 2 notice in accordance with Chapter 985 of Wisconsin statutes in the Sawyer County Record and Sawyer County Gazette and posted.
Excuse me, Chair. We didn't do the pledge.
That's the second time I've done that. Thank you for that. If we could please rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Feel bad, Jesse, on that public safety.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Okay, we did the statement of committee hearing. We will now entertain a motion for approval of the October minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Motion by Mr. Buckholz,
I'll second that.
second by Ms. Hessel. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public comment, please note comment time is intended for general public comments, not comments relating to specific application before this committee. Each agenda item requiring a public hearing will have its public hearing conducted just prior to the application being considered by this committee. If you wish to speak on a specific agenda item, we encourage you to hold your comments until then. If there's anyone wishing to speak now, you'll have 3 minutes if you're speaking on something that it's not an agenda item.
Public hearing agenda.
Public hearing agenda item, sorry.
First I have is Kate Mayberry.
All right, hello.
Please state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Kate Mayberry. My address is 11501N Gouch Circle Road, Hayward. Our property borders the Highway 63 right across from where the Kubariks are trying to do their rezoning. And we just want to say that we support the rezoning. The property looks better than it's looked in many, many years. They're fixing it up. I remember when Kubariks had an auction house south of Hayward, and that area always was well taken care of. And so we support it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Second item is Douglas Kurtzwell.
Douglas Kurzweil, 11055W Arrow Road, Hayward, Wisconsin. A few minutes ago, we all pledged our allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands. Two of the big reasons the American Republic has survived for over 230 years are the facts that our government is a government of law, not of personalities, and that we all have a constitutionally guaranteed right of due process. In late July 2020, David Toshik informed me he was demolishing the collapsing rodent-infested legal non-conforming structure just across our lot line. He said he would build a replacement and rent it weekly like the other cabin he had rehabilitated 2 years earlier on the same single-family lot. I wondered if that was allowable in an RR1 zone. He said he had permission from Jay Kozlowski in writing. In late June of 2021, the second cabin began use as a short-term rental. On July 20th, I requested a formal written determination from Mr. Kozlowski regarding the legality of the operation of this business in an RR1 zone. On September 28th, I received his response with his 4th different reason for allowing this violation. On October 22, I filed an appeal to the BOA. On April 26, 2022, I finally got a hearing. During their testimony, both Mr. Kozlowski and his attorney misrepresented material facts. I have the receipts. They were able to confuse some members of the VOA, like criminal lawyers with guilty clients are known to do, and as a result, my appeal was denied. The next morning, a member of the BOA phoned me and very early in the call stated, quote, "Doug, I fucked up," close quote. On May 13, I filed an appeal, the BOA denial in circuit court. On August 29, I was granted a default judgment reversing the BOA's denial. On September 16, Mr. Kozlowski curiously told me, quote, "We're appealing," close quote. On September 19, an appeal was filed. This matter remains in litigation. An attempt to swiftly change the ordinance in the holiday season and in the dark of winter is reprehensible and indefensible. Even if successful, it only shields Mr. Kozlowski from his zoning law violation. During the attempted cover-up, state laws have been broken. Among them are the Open Meetings Law, the Open Records Law, and portions of Wisconsin State Statute Chapters 59, 61, and 62. You would also be violating my rights to due process, a federal matter, as well as violating the oath you took to support and defend the Constitution. At the very least,
10 seconds remaining.
table this until spring, when the snowbird voters are back. There will be dire consequences for the tax base and the social structure of rural lakeshore neighborhoods of Sawyer County. if
Okay,
we
thank
don't.
you, sir.
Thank you, and I do have a hard copy for the members of the committee.
Anybody else?
Yes, next I have Linda Zilmer.
Linda Zilmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Wisconsin, Edgewater property owner. Mr. Kurzweil forgot to mention that the chair of the Board of Appeals came before your zoning committee and tried to tell you within his 3 minutes of public comment that he was allowed, that he believes that the Board of Appeals did err in their decision. But what I wanted to formally put on my form and speak to today was also a request to postpone any further action on the proposed ordinance amendment for the multi-dwelling development. I think there's a lot of validity. Can I have paused my minutes till Mr. Kurzweil?
I would say so.
Yeah, thank you. Right now, you have town and county clerks that have just come off elections. They're going into tax statement season. We've got hunting season. We've got Thanksgiving. We have Christmas. There's a lot of things going on where to try and rush anything through at this time of the year is probably not in the best interest of the public or future ordinances. With regard to item B, the CUP 22005, that should be a dead issue. There was not sufficient information when the applicant came before the zoning committee earlier this year. And what the motion was to adjourn. And the requirements were actually recommendations in the zoning administrator's staff report. So there is no ambiguity about the engineering reports because of the site conditions being so narrow and sloped and adjacent to Lake Chautauqua. The second zoning committee decision letter to them was that, to the applicant, was that if they intended to pursue this, they should have their materials in by November 1st. I don't believe the applicant did, so this should be a dead issue and left in the hands of the applicant to then file an amended or new application as he sees fit. And lastly, Muni Code is something that should have been a topic of discussion and maybe even allowed more public comment by this zoning committee, because over half Muni Code is zoning. The original draft here has all the zoning code already in the body of the code. The county has paid significant legal fees, Muni Code fees, and a lot of staff time and the former administrator's time to put this all together in the code. So I would ask that, again, not try to rush this into December, but put this into January and give us a sufficient amount of time to go through the Muni Code so you understand how the zoning ordinance fits into it. And again, this was an item that was added at the last minute. It was not part of the public notice in the newspapers, and I believe individuals as well as towns have a broad interest in how this code goes forward. Thank you.
Yes, next we have John Rainville.
John Rainville, 16100
Bank Road, Stone Lake, Wisconsin. The reason I'm here is because in 2017, I looked at this property that I purchased, and the bordering property is a 5-acre wetland adjacent to navigable waters. From 2017 until today, I've gone to zoning consistently asking, what's the parameters on building on that property? Answer, they have to be 75 feet back from a wetland, 65 feet from the center right-of-way road, 10 feet from opposing property. The onus is on the homeowner to make sure that their parcel fits. In the general applications or requirements for a conditional use permit, it pretty much says it's up to the homeowner to do this, get a lot of things done. This homeowner has gotten nothing done, has been allowed by Jay to build on a part of the property that is not zoned properly. It's about, rumor has it, 25, 35 feet from the wetland ordinary high water mark, should be at 75 feet. Jay is allowing that person to build in a restricted area under the pretense that he's going to change the zoning. So I wake up one morning, you said you're going to go to the DNR, you're going to do this and going to get it changed. That's what your email says to me. First off, you stated that, well, it's a non-navigable water, so we can do this 40-foot setback. And I said, it's nothing to do with the non-navigable wetland. It's got to do with the wetland adjacent to navigable waters. And I can cite all types of court cases about what defines navigable a wetland adjacent to navigable waters. He's throwing that out. He said, well, I didn't see any rocks, or I didn't see this or see that. Well, too bad. I asked you, did you see where the hydrology water exits this wetland, which is one of the tenets of defining a wetland? So anyways, I got thrusted into this. I had a 5-acre parcel next door to me that was protected by the current zoning ordinances, and zoning has allowed somebody to put in a little hovel. Besides, you talked about, Mr. Buckholz,
You have
talked
10
about
seconds remaining.
the camper issue. This guy's got a little Winnebago on his little site here, not conforming with the
Okay, thank
setbacks
you,
of
sir. Your
wetland,
time
not
is up.
conforming with the roadways.
Thank you. We appreciate your
Okay,
opinions.
I want to know how
Your
I
time
can
is
get
up.
into a meeting.
It's not a conversation, sir. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still in public comment, if you want to ask if anyone else wants to make public comment. I don't see anyone online.
Okay, if there's no more public comments in the room or online, then we'll go to the next agenda item.
We have no rezone applications for today, or at least rezone applications that don't also require conditional use permits. This is a public hearing in the town of Lendrick, conditional use permit number 22. Am I being picked up on this?
It's a little bit faint online.
We share this one.
Go-
Share.
Yep.
That's probably better. This is a public hearing in the town of Lendrick, conditional use permit number 22-032, owner Kabaric Auction and Estate Services LLC, part of the southwest one quarter, the northwest one quarter, section 12, township 41 north, range 9 west, parcel 0149411222301. It is 28.50 total acres, zoned to agricultural 1. Permit is desired for the place to place an online auction house for people to see and inspect items. Preview hours would be 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. and then pickup time from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. This would happen about 10 times a year. As per section 17.4, parent B, parent 25, this is a like or similar use in the opinion of the Sawyer County Zoning Committee, subject to procedures for obtaining a conditional use permit. As part of my staff report, again, the permit is desired as a like or similar use, subject to Sawyer County Zoning Committee and procedures for obtaining a conditional use permit. The permit is desired for an auction sales event. At the August 19th, 2022 Sawyer County Zoning Committee meeting, discussion was held with the committee. At that time, it was determined that an auction sales event would be a like or similar use as to an event barn, a professional office or studio, a wholesaling establishment, or a new or used car sales establishment, which is specifically listed in uses that require a conditional use permit within the agricultural one zone district. Additionally, conversation should be held as to clarify that an auction sales event would be a like or similar use to another listed conditional use in the opinion of the Sawyer County Zoning Committee. Per the applicant's statement, they have recently purchased the Pendleton Farm and are currently working on improvements to the property. As part of the improvements, they would like to hold approximately 5 online auction consignment sales at the property. This would include 1 week of setup, 1 week of live online bidding, and a pickup day after the auction has ended. There would be bidders coming to the farm on preview day, which would be from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., and on pickup day, which is typically 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. and by appointment only. This is an attempt to spread out any additional traffic that may occur. As part of my staff report and items for potential conditions, I have listed that conditional use permit number 22-032 is limited to the property owner, not to exceed 12 separate auction events per year, each event to include a preview day and a pickup day. That preview day hours be from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. That pickup day hours would typically be from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. or by appointment only for certain circumstances. That if additional buildings are proposed for the auction sales event or to alter other previously listed conditions, that an additional conditional use permit renewal be required, that all signage to follow Sawyer County zoning ordinance sign requirements, and that all their town, county, state, and federal laws are followed. As by action of the town board, motion was approved. Gordy Christians, Town Chair, Jack Schustrom, Supervisor, Jason Schustrom, Supervisor, Michael Bandro, Supervisor. No additional comments signed. Carol Stone, Town Clerk. There were 6 opinion letters sent out, 0 were returned. That is all.
We don't have the votes unanimous by the town.
It was, and Ron Poppy was absent.
Okay. Committee will need a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Have a motion by Mr. Buckholz
I'll
and
second
a
that.
second by Ms. Hessel. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are in public hearing at this time. Is the applicant or a representative present that would like to speak on behalf of this conditional use permit?
Sure.
If you don't mind, just stepping up the podium and just give us any information, any additional information that you might have or.
Yeah, I think my name's Ron Kabarek. I'm part of the Kabarek Auction LLC. This is our business partner, Susan, her husband aren't here today, but again, we've recently purchased that 28 acres back from a pretty poor reverse mortgage and would like to make that our home base for our auction business. And like we said, 10 to 12 auctions, online auctions there a year. We're doing some renovation in the buildings already. And you can see when you drive by, it looks quite nice. And we've been in business for 25 years. I think most people know Kabarek's, and we've do an outstanding job, and we're good with the community. So we're looking forward to moving forward with that business out there. And I'm here for any questions, I guess.
I do have a question. So how much traffic would you expect? Would you expect to have like a whole bunch of people there at one time or not?
The auction market has changed over the years. COVID kind of started the online auctions, which we started doing. And last year we did 0 live auctions, correct? Everything was online and we had a lot of them. Most of those are at our clients' properties. That makes the most sense. What we would do here is a lot of people have a few items that they don't have enough themselves. We would bring them in and do a sale at the place, like we used to have our place in Springbrook years ago. So that's our intent.
But the number of people there.
And again, with the online auction, it's spread out a lot better, because when you have a live auction, you'll have a couple hundred people there standing around traffic. The online auction there's preview times that people can come and look. It's spread out. A lot of people don't even come and look. They just bid online based on what they see. And then they schedule pickup times. So we don't just let everybody come at one time. It's not like a soccer event. If you've been by there when there's been a soccer game going on out there, there's 300 people going in and out of that same driveway, which we share with them.
So a scheduled pickup time, so you only allow so many per hour? Or
Yeah,
something?
Susan, you can, how many, you're the one scheduled to pick up. So typically,
Anywhere from 5 to at the most 10 per half hour.
yeah, people in a half an hour. And our crew is there to help them load. It's quite different than a live auction where you got a lot of people standing around, a lot of vehicles. You know, nobody be parking on the highway. They wouldn't have to because of the way it's set up. And plus, we've got lots of property there, so.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
No, you can't answer what I was gonna ask.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Kubarak. Kubarak or?
Kubarak.
Kubarak.
Yep. We're good?
Yes, sir, for now. There may be some follow-on questions
Okay.
after if there's any public comments, but.
Okay.
So at this time, I will ask if there's any one wishing to speak in support of this conditional use permit in the room or online. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this conditional use permit? Okay. Hearing none, if there's no other questions from the committee during public hearing, we will need a motion to come out of public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ms. Hessel, second by Mr. Buckholz. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are. Yes, this is the discussion action for conditional use permit number 22-032, owner Kubarak Auction and Estate Services LLC. Legal description is previously read into record. This request is subject to section 17.4, parent B, parent 25, for an auction sales event, which would be a like or similar use in the opinion of the Sawyer County Zoning Committee. Again, as per my staff report and potential conditions, that CUP 22-032 is limited to the current property owner, not to exceed 12 separate auction events per year, including preview day and pickup day. Preview day hours be from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Pickup day hours typically from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. or by appointment only for certain circumstances. That if additional buildings are proposed for auction sales events, they would need to, or to alter these potential conditions, that a conditional use permit renewal be required, that all signage to meet Sawyer County zoning ordinance and all other town, county, state, federal laws are followed. Again, as per discussion with the committee, to signify and to solidify the record, you should have additional discussion pertaining that an online auction sales event would be a like or similar use as to other previously listed conditional use permits within the agricultural zone district, included to but not limiting a event barn, professional office or studio, wholesaling establishment, or new or used car sales establishment, which is specifically listed as a conditional use permit within the agricultural one zone district.
Committee.
I'll make a motion to approve the CUP 22-032.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hessel to approve the CUP, and I will second that motion. Any further discussion?
And it would be that this committee sees that an auction sales event is a like or similar use as to other listed conditional use permits within the agricultural one zone district, such as a wholesaling establishment, professional office or studio, new or used car sales establishment, etc.
Correct.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Ms. Hessel.
Would your motion also include my staff report's conditions?
It would also include your staff reports conditions.
Wonderful.
We don't need findings of fact on that.
Finding the facts is 1 through 10.
So in further discussion, I'm curious why we're limiting them to, it says 10 times per year here, but you said 12 times per year.
Right, not to exceed, because they said approximately 10,
Okay.
or they said approximately 5, which each event being a pickup day and a preview day. So each event has 2 separate occurrences on the property. So instead of approximately 10 of those, I said not to exceed 12. In case they wanted to have 6 events a
Okay,
year, then they're not exceeding that amount.
okay,
When I see approximates, I like to go a little bit over that and then have that as the max.
okay. All right. I think we have that clarified. Any further discussion?
I have one, Mr. Chairman. Stacy, you,
Microphone.
yeah, like, you included the possible conditions for your approval in the motion, right?
That is correct,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you. Yep, that's all.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, we will need a roll call vote on this for the approval of the CUP.
Stacy Hessel,
Yes.
Jesse Betcher,
Yes,
Ron Buckholz.
Yes.
Michael Maestri,
Yes.
all in favor. Thank you.
all right, motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on, this is for rezone and conditional use applications. This is a public hearing, the town of Round Lake, rezone number 22-012, owner Travis Butterfield. The applicant has requested to postpone this rezone hearing until next month. And I don't know if it's appropriate, Andy, that I would have discussion as to why they postponed at this point.
No, you can certainly, yeah, I think it's worthwhile to mention that, Jay, absolutely.
Okay. Let's go through and yeah, and I'll just explain the situation. So this is for a rezone for a non-metallic mining operation. It's a rezone accompanied with a conditional use permit for the location and operation, as well as the reclamation plan. The applicant had initially started this process all the way back in June, and has since kind of restructured or amended their application to limit the actual mine site. The current request that we had would have a mine site of, I think it was a little over 20 acres. In conversations now with the applicant as of the early part of this week, they've re-identified and solidified their actual mine site to be as a lesser amount of around 10.5 acres. That 10.5 acre request did not go out to publication as a 10.5 acre request. It went out as the full area of the property. So the applicants are wanting to amend their application to reference the actual mine site and then to solidify that in publication. So this would go back to the town for that actual mine site request. Ironically enough, now with that 10.5 acre request, this property is split zone between F1 and RR1. Within the RR1 zone district, non-metallic mining is not allowed. In the F1 zone district, it is allowed with a conditional use permit. With the new 10.5 acres identified, they will not need the rezone, is that the entire mine site will occur within the F1 zone district. So the applicant at this point is looking at least postponing the rezone now, then possibly withdrawing the rezone and moving forward with the conditional use permit amendment for the actual mine site of 10.5 acres. So again, at this point, because of how the publication had gone out, showing and referencing the entire property, I would make a recommendation that we postpone all of these items.
And if I could just add very briefly, Mr. Chair, I had conversations with both Jay and the zoning office last week about this when we found out about the desired amendment to the permit application. In fairness to the town and in fairness to the public, we think proceeding at this point would, obviously, it would not work because the application has changed. We have no issue with considering this an amended application because it is for the same or similar purpose and dealing with the same property. But we again want the public and the town to have opportunity to provide the input to this committee. So I would echo Jay's recommendation that this be postponed.
Okay, thanks, Andy. My only question or maybe concern is that if this goes back to town, when this was initially applied for, since then the town of Round Lake has changed their ordinance regarding the open pit mine. So is that could that affect the outcome potentially? I mean, because things have changed in the town since the initial application.
Well, and if I could address that quickly, Jay, if that's all right.
Go for it.
I think that ordinance in the town could impact Butterfield's application and impact Butterfield's ability to operate this quarry. That said, that's really not our dispute as a county. And so we follow our procedures. We either grant or deny a permit application. And so we'll go through that process, and whatever the town may claim as their enforcement ability, that's between Mr. Butterfield and the town.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was involving some sort of double jeopardy since it had already had a town hearing, and the amendment is for going to be a reduction in the impact as opposed to, more impactful. So I just didn't know if it was absolutely necessary to go back to the town. Although we want their input, I didn't know if it's just something that we're doing as a kind of a nice thing, or if it's actually a requirement.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know that it's a requirement, but I'd rather be safe than sorry, frankly, and give the town opportunity. If the town doesn't want that opportunity, that's fine. But I think that we as the county want to make sure that we provide them with the opportunity for input.
Okay, I completely agree. I just wanted to get clarification on that. Thank you, Andy.
And I'll just kind of just take on to that. I mean, at the county level, and again, in conversations with Andy Phillips, we're seeing this as an amended conditional use permit application and not a new conditional use permit application.
Okay, that makes sense. So amended CUP, but probably going to rescind the rezone request is what it sounds like.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And we'll have totality on that on Monday. I gave them as a deadline that they need to provide all information back to us so we can start the public hearing process and publication process.
Okay, so that covers items 4A through 4F. Is that correct?
Do we make a motion in second to postpone all?
No, I got my light on.
Okay.
But,
But yes, that would,
Just
whatever
just
motion's
ask
done,
what I-
include all of them.
okay, so one motion can conclude all that.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Okay, I make a motion to postpone the rezone and conditional use permit on A through F to the next, would it be the next meeting, Jay?
Yeah, December.
Okay, the December zoning committee meeting.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Buckholz to postpone items 4A through 4F until the December meeting.
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Hessel. Any further discussion?
If I may, very quickly, Mr. Chair, I apologize,
Yep.
but Jay, is there a chance that the application doesn't come in time for the December meeting? I'm just concerned about putting this automatically on the December agenda if we still don't have a final application on file.
I had given them a deadline that they need to supply additional documentation back to our office by this coming Monday. And if it's not returned by Monday, we'll deem the application incomplete.
Okay, that's fine. Then
So
let's
I'm
make
ready
sure-
to proceed
Yep.
with the December hearing.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
All right, moving on, under new business, proposed ordinance amendment for multi-dwelling development and definition of a resort. I do have listed here as discussion possible action to send to the towns. You saw the very rough first version from me last month. And now we do have a subsequent legal review as kind of a working version 2. Now, working version 2 does have a lot of highlights, red lines, deletions. It is smaller format, just because it's got that formatting, highlighting on the side. I can get that cleaned up for next month's. But I do want to, keep this on the agenda just so that we can have, additional discussion on this. We heard in public comments, some of the reasons why we're going through an ordinance amendment. It's somewhat twofold. One is there are errors and kind of confusion within the true multi-dwelling aspects of the Sawyer County zoning ordinance, and I don't think that relates to any of the public comments that we heard, but through the process of kind of re-looking at ordinances, there's some confusion in multi-dwelling development, and we need to get that clarified. One of the other changes that we're looking at making, and this was reiterated back in 2020 and again back in June or July through zoning committee, is how they view and what you would define to be as a resort. And that is the crux of kind of where the public comments have come from. And there is, yes, pending litigation on that matter. But really from those aspects, it's something that elected officials, the citizens of Sawyer County, as well as the towns, need to fully define. If it's not the appetite of the committee to view as a resort of more than 2 dwelling units, and that anyone over more than 1 dwelling unit is constituted a resort, so be it. That is fine. That is the appetite for elected officials, concerned citizens of the community, as well as town board of members to decide. I don't care which way it goes, but I just need totality and clear language as how to properly administer those ordinances.
So my question is, you struck out where it says with the old definition of a resort, right, that said dealt with the seller's permit and licensing and stuff like that. So are we not wanting to keep that in there as a definition?
Yeah, and that's old language. The Wisconsin Department of Health and Family Services, I don't even think is a department anymore. It's held under, it changed names. So we just kind of simplified it in those aspects by deleting where that licensing is held from, because as of right now, that licensing is handled through Sawyer County's health department acting as an agent of the state through DADCAP. So instead of listing that, we just struck it out and said a resort is a for-profit business. You look in version 2, we even got rid of holding. So a resort is a for-profit business which provides rental to the public of more than 2 dwelling units contained in 1 or more permanent buildings used primarily for recreational use. Now, if you think that having, again, 2 dwellings on the same lot and renting both of those out would define as a resort, then tell me that and we'll reflect it to make it as such. If you think that having 2 dwelling units rented on the same property would not be as a resort, that's how it's kind of set up to read right now.
Right. So we had a discussion a couple months ago to help define a multi-dwelling or multi-family units. Did that get codified?
No, and that's part of this ordinance amendment is to try and codify that. It doesn't read well because we have, the definition of dwelling multifamily, and then we have the definition of multi-dwelling development. They're similar but different. They're found in multiple different zone districts, where within the R1 zone district, you can have multifamily, which is 3 or more dwelling units, but there's this gap when you have 2 dwelling units. Because we had some confusion a couple months back when someone wanted to do a multifamily development. They have the acreage amounts, they have the frontage amounts, but the ordinance doesn't allow for 2 dwelling units under multifamily. It only allows it for 3 or more, which I find is bizarre. You can have 1, you can have more than 3, but there was no spot in the ordinance where you could have 2. And that didn't make any sense to me. So we tried to kind of have those options available through conditional use permit processes when you meet the acreage amount, frontage amount, that if you had a large chunk of property and you wanted to have 2 dwelling units on the same lot, that you could apply for a conditional use permit for a multifamily development. without legally splitting the lot into two separate lots.
Got it. So what you're looking for, I'm assuming, is the committee to make a decision to help define those numbers, and then that will be sent back to the towns for their approval.
That and really kind of just a, unfortunately, homework assignment for the committee to, really read through some of these ordinance amendments, proposed ordinance amendments, and at least, come back with your notes or concerns or additions and alterations. Because this is the process of crafting ordinance language.
Mhm. So, yes.
Jay, court counsel and you went over this together, didn't you? Or no?
To an extent,
To
yes.
an extent, okay. So I just want to put something out there on resorts. Public more than 2 dwellings. I don't know how we can define that as a resort. I mean, there's places out there already that are doing this and they're not classified as resorts. I guess I don't quite understand it, but I don't know where more than 2 would be. Well, if you go over 2,
then you would be as a resort. If
Then
you're,
you'd be in the resort, yes.
and that's how the language reads right now, is that if you have 3 dwellings on the same lot and you're wanting to rent those out, you would be defined as a resort with this proposed changes. If you had 2 dwellings on the same lot and you wanted to rent both of those out, you would not be defined as a resort.
as a resort, yes.
And there's other things, at foot here with, again, we have multiple properties out there that have 2 existing dwelling units on the same lot. I would probably put that number over 500, less than 1,000, where going back pre-zoning, early 70s up until the mid 80s, I believe it was 1985 when we had a larger comprehensive zoning ordinance amendment that solidified that you're only allowed to have 1 dwelling unit per lot that meets the minimum frontage requirements. Prior to that, if you had a chunk of land and you wanted to build a house for yourself and a house for your in-laws, you would have 2 dwelling units on the same lot. And those have continued up until present day. And now those properties are going up for sale, and you're having developers and investment companies that are snatching those up and saying, hey, I want to rent both of those dwelling units because I can make some good money on those through the short-term rental process. Now, renting of both of those dwelling units that were existing on that one lot, do you see that as a resort or not? And that's really what the crux of the public comments were about. That's what the litigation is about. That's what this ordinance amendment is trying to solidify. Again, I'm not a proponent either way. I don't care. At the end of the day, I'm not losing sleep over this. I just need to know how to administer it effectively. When I had first was asked for my determination, I reached out to legal counsel at that time, Rebecca Roker, and she didn't think that it met that definition. Asked zoning committee as to, do you see that being renting 2 dwelling units to be constituted as a resort back in September of 2020? The guidance I got from the committee at that time was, no, we don't see that as a resort. And that was then challenged, was submitted then to the Board of Adjustments. Board of Adjustments upheld that decision, then was later appealed to Circuit Court. Circuit Court reversed the decision, and Sawyer County is currently appealing that Circuit Court decision.
On whether or not 2 units on 1 lot is a resort.
Right. As the ordinance kind of reads, it's muddy. And that's why it's been upheld and appealed and overturned. And this ordinance amendment is to solidify that so we can get it out of litigation. And again, which way it falls, don't care.
So another question I have then, if something is defined as a resort, what other requirements does that owner have? Are they required to then form an LLC? Are they required to, what other things do they need to do if they're now considered a resort? Do they have to have a name with
You'd have to have a conditional use permit. And that would be an interesting thing that I'd have to ask Andy about, is if you had an existing non-conforming property that had 2 dwelling units on it that is also non-conforming based upon size, if you could apply for a conditional use permit for a resort, because ordinances aren't crafted for existing non-conforming per se. They're crafted for new development. In a new setting, in order to have 2 dwelling units on one lot, you need double the lot minimum requirements. On Lakeshore, you would need 200 feet as opposed to 100 feet. You would need 40,000 square feet of land area as opposed to 20,000 square feet of land area. And in those new scenarios, if you had those frontage requirements, you could then apply for a conditional use permit to become a resort. When you have these existing ones that are out there that do not meet those minimum requirements, I am not sure if you could even apply for the conditional use permit then at that point, because you're not meeting the double requirements.
Well, and I think the bigger question, Jay, is whether we as a county could require an application for a CUP if it's an existing non-conforming structure or use. I mean, we're going to create, no matter what happens here, we're going to create issues with existing properties and existing structures, whether we amend the code or don't amend the code. I think from my perspective, a legal perspective, we should amend the code in order to provide clarity to the public about what is allowed and what's not allowed, provide definitional clarity so we all understand what the rules are, so to speak, going forward. As it relates to non-conforming uses, the goal of non-conforming uses is to eventually bring them into conformity with the code. So as the property changes hands, changes character, things of that nature, you can bring them into compliance with the code. And so it would take years for that to happen. Fine. If we do nothing to the code, I think we are just perpetuating the ambiguity and the lack of understanding on the part of the public as to how these definitions work and what that means as it relates to a particular landowner's use of his or her property. So that's the concern. I'll note too that the only substantive difference between version 1 and version 2, because what I did is took what Jay did in version 1 and tried to clean it up and tighten it up a bit from my legal perspective. So that's what I did with version 2. The substantive change, it occurred to us that if you look at the language that we have in version 2 under RR1 and RR2A, the items 3 and 4, what do we do with duplexes, or what do we do, for example, with a habitable area that exists above a garage? Garage is an accessory structure that's allowed. Essentially, if we have a habitable area above a garage that is in addition to an existing dwelling on the property, you have 2 families that could live on that property. Doesn't meet the definition of dwelling multifamily, all right, but it's an accessory structure that contains a habitable area. Are we going to treat that as a permitted use or a conditional use? That was the one question that I had for this committee, and you don't need to answer it today, but as part of the homework, so to speak, let's think about the different ways that folks are using properties and ways that we can, again, provide clarity as to those uses going forward.
Okay, it sounds, to me, Andy, it seems like a dwelling multifamily would include what you described. I don't see how that doesn't, but I guess, what do you need from the committee today? You just want us to do homework, or do you want a decision on something?
Yeah, no, I guess I want you to do homework at this point and, talk to your constituents, find your own rhyme or reason as to, how you think these zoning ordinances should be viewed. We have to clean up multi-dwelling development and multifamily development. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. There's ambiguity and conflicting language within the ordinance that has to be cleaned up. The other aspect that I want to clean up and don't know and don't care again which way it goes is the true definition of a resort. We have to fall somewhere on that line. Is it over 1, you're a resort? Is it over 2, you're a resort? I don't think we want to go anywhere else than that. That needs to be solidified so that I can administer properly.
Okay.
And if I could just add to that as part of the homework when you're thinking about these definitions, let's try to use terminology that makes sense. And so you can absolutely define a resort as 2 or more dwellings on the same lot. But I don't know that the public would think of that as a resort. And so I would encourage this committee to think about definitional terms that make sense to the public using commonly understood terms. Which is why, again, Mr. Kozlowski and I tried to craft the definitions consistent with what we view not only this committee's intent to be, but also in a manner that's consistent with everyday terminology.
It looks like it's going to be really hard to make a distinction, an apparent difference between multi-dwelling development and a resort, no matter how we word it. Do we have to include both of those, or can we just omit one from the ordinance? Because I don't see how there's going to be, how you can have a difference. If it's 3 or more, then it would be a resort or multi-dwelling development.
Well, I think that the true definition falls there is a resort is, as a rental. It's other individuals coming in and using those buildings versus multifamily. Maybe
No, I said multi-dwelling.
Multi-dwelling.
It specifically says long or short-term rental use. So it's going to be very hard to define a difference, a clear difference between multi-dwelling development and resort if we have both of them on there. So my question is, do we have to have both of those on there? And maybe we just call everything a resort that has 3 or more houses, or call everything a multi-dwelling development. Because the definitions aren't going to be very, very different. They're both multiple dwellings on one lot that are for long or short-term rental.
Right, and I think that's probably, one that I definitely earmarked here. We'll probably need to look at that definition of multi-dwelling development, because multi-dwelling development is found within, again, aspects that require a conditional use permit. And that's where it does, define that regardless of the form of ownership consisting of 3 or more dwelling units. We'll have to work on that one. I can see that there's issues with that right now.
Well, and I think too, let me just add to that. I think that's a very good point, Chair Batcher, because we might want to, Jay, take a look at the definition of short-term, long-term rental. Because the uses of those dwellings, I mean, if you're a resort, I think people come to a resort for a week, 2 weeks. They don't sit at a resort for 2 months. So let's just think about that, because I think that's a very good point.
Right, and I'm looking at it even from an aspect where, let's say I have a 40-acre chunk of land and I want to build 4 cabins for my family, and it's just my family use. I'm not renting it.
Right.
I'm not renting it. It's not condoed. I just want to have 4 houses on my 40-acre parcel for my family and I. That's where I'm looking at. That's what a multi-dwelling development is. It's the use that further defines it. Is it a condo? Is it a resort? Is it something for short or long-term use?
I think that's right. Yeah, because in your circumstance with a 40 with 4 dwellings, I don't think anybody would commonly understand that to be a resort.
Yeah, and we have those situations. We have those situations in the county. So, these aren't hypotheticals. These are things that are already out there.
Right, that multi-dwelling development would include hotel rooms as well.
Right.
So what differentiates that from a resort? Because you're only renting that for a couple nights at a time, 1 or 2 or 3 nights. So I just think that something needs to be clarified on that, the difference.
Yep.
I think also we have to be clear on not just what they're using the purpose for now, but what it could be used in the future. So you're saying like four houses on 40 acres for four families, but maybe they sell it as a multi-unit and rent it out. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, the other scenario that was brought up to me, and not to just crazy snowball this, but there was an LLC that bought up 4 or 5 properties, separate lots, but they're all right next to each other. So you got 5 lots in this small little area, and each of the lot has a dwelling on it, and they're renting each of those dwelling units. So that's, again, our resort definition, or at least multi-dwelling development, has it on its own separate lots. Now, this one does have, looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's as a resort, but they're on their each separate lots. So I think we do need, to carefully craft something as to, that would meet the definition of a resort. You need to apply for a conditional use permit. So it's not just if they're on one lot, but it's becoming more and more difficult to regulate these, because you are seeing these larger investment companies that are coming in, buying up lots and turning them around for short-term rentals. And they may be in one quadrant, they might be 10 of them on one lake. Are you then a resort, even though they're separate places? So there's your homework assignment. Think about it some more. Andy and I will get together. We'll kind of hammer out some of those definitions a little bit more to make them read a little bit more concise. But any additional comments, notes, clarifications that this committee can offer would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, will do. Can we move on then to 5B?
Yeah.
Because we're not voting on anything there. We're just doing.
Right. So it was discussion, possible action to send to towns. So that at this point, there's no action to send to the towns.
Okay.
Moving on to item B, conditional use permit number 22-005. Previously, a motion was made by Mr. Buckholz and seconded by Stacy Hessel to wipe out previous conditions and adjournments due to vague context at the October 21, 2022 zoning committee meeting. That motion also included that the applicant can amend the current application or submit a new application for the December public hearing date, which includes submitting back to the town board. However, this motion was never voted on. The motion needs to be voted on. For those that need remembrance, this conditional use permit was for a marina down on County Highway F on Lake Shetek. It was initially adjourned by Mr. Paulson back in March. That adjournment never set a deadline. The conditions of the adjournment was that the applicant would need to provide a fire number, engineering for a driveway, and engineering for the building design. In conversations with legal counsel throughout that time, again, there was no deadline established on that, and that's generally not how you would end up adjourning something. You would need to have a totality deadline on that. So we brought it back in July, where we set a deadline that the applicant needs to provide this information by November 1st. We then further had conversations in October that the condition language was very vague, in that how can one be required engineering for a building if the applicant doesn't know the size of the building or location of the building, or was even approved any type of conditional use permit to move forward with the engineering? Generally, when you would have those types of conditions, they'd be conditioned upon approval. So it's kind of a cart in front of the horse scenario. So that is where discussion was held last month, is that, again, discussion with a motion and a second, that we would that we would wipe out the previous conditions and adjournment due to the vague context. Again, we had a motion and second that was never voted on. This committee should solidify that with going through that said motion again.
So can we, so all we need is a vote. So to make this right, can we have the same two people make the motion in the second and then have further discussion?
I'll defer that to Andy as to how to clean that.
I would prefer that it reflect that it is simply a request for a vote on the existing motion because that motion was on the floor appropriately, so I think it stays on the floor. Otherwise, we risk inconsistent motions. So let's call for a vote with the motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. So we have a motion by Mr. Buckholz, a second by Ms. Hessel, for the,
To wipe out previous conditions and adjournment due to vague context. This motion also includes that the applicant can amend the current application or submit a new application for the December public hearing date, which includes submittal back to the town board.
okay, any further discussion? I just have a question on that. So does that mean that if they don't do it by December, then it's null and void, or they have to start over from scratch?
Yeah, and the applicant has resubmitted an application. It's ultimately the same application.
Okay,
And he is set and earmarked for December. Now, in that December meeting, I think, yes, we do certainly want to, figure out in detail what his plans are. If there is to be any type of approval from this committee, that you would look at my staff report that would reflect conditions that the applicant would need to provide engineering for any type of building, because there are some severe slopes that I am concerned about. But again, that would be if this committee was to make any type of approval on that.
okay. And so before we vote, I'll just confirm that the person who made the motion and seconded are still good with those. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we will need a roll call vote.
Could I interject that?
Yes.
It was because Kathy wasn't here. We weren't on task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're making it right. Everything's fine.
As long as you don't blame legal counsel, I'd appreciate it.
You were next in line.
Yeah, that's what I
Stacy
figured.
Hessel,
Yes.
Ron Buckholz,
Yes.
Michael Maestri,
Yes.
Jesse Betcher.
Yes.
Thank you. All in
And
favor.
just to clarify, it was actually my fault because
Yeah, you weren't here
it
either.
wasn't
Yeah.
legal counsel, it wasn't Kathy's fault, it was Jesse's fault.
Next, we have Municode. This is the codification of the ordinances. Andy Alvarado, the county administrator, wanted me to put this on the zoning committee agenda. I do see that he is online as well. I believe Andy Alvarado had conversations with Andy Phillips. So for those that aren't aware, the current version of Municode has the zoning ordinances listed in the appendix. And there's some rhyme and reasons as to why we put them in the appendix as opposed to the actual code section for the codification. And I'll just leave that open for the Andys to discuss in more detail.
I see Alvarado is not willing to volunteer. Andy, did you want to talk about it, or you want me to talk about it?
Can you hear me? I'm having a little bit of a computer issue.
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Okay, great. So I think everybody knows the history of Municode, and where we're at is we have a final draft. Like I mentioned at the board meeting the other night, there were some ordinances that were missed, and so those are being put together in a supplement. So the current draft of the Code of Ordinances will come to the board for approval. We can get that adopted. But before we did that, there has been discussion during the formation of this as to the implementation of the zoning ordinances in the code. At the present time, they are in an appendix for the most part. And there's good reason, as Andy Phillips can explain, that there was some concern that if they were put within the body of the Code of Ordinances, then that might trigger a town approval, that we're somehow amending the zoning ordinances. And so I think that's why they're in the appendix at the present time. But there's a different school of thought too, where at some point they should be codified with the rest of the full Code of Ordinances. So we talked about it at admin committee and recommendation to bring, since these are the zoning committee's ordinances, to bring it to you for consideration or discussion. And with that, I'll let Andy Phillips maybe explain more of the legal aspect of it.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And I think that let's start with the premise that all things being equal, I would prefer that the zoning ordinances be within the entire code of Sawyer County. All right, so let's just start with that. The reason they're in the appendix is, as Mr. Alvarado noted, there is a requirement, as this committee is well aware, that whenever we amend our zoning ordinance, the towns have to approve those amendments to the ordinance. And so the question becomes whether recodification, so to speak, and a different numbering system might trigger a requirement to get town approval. And if those ordinances are contained within Muni Code, what is the extent of the approval that's required? What does that look like? So to avoid that question, we can put the zoning code in an appendix to Muni Code. And there's no amendment. That the existing zoning ordinance just comes over into Muni Code as is. And so there would be no argument or no suggestion that somehow the towns would have any sort of approval authority over the zoning code. So that's number one. Number two is that we've got an existing numbering system for our zoning code that is familiar to our zoning staff, our zoning administrator, the public, the towns, everybody. And if we pull the existing zoning code into Muni Code, there is going to be a change in the numbering. And so that might create some sort of confusion or issue that we might want to avoid. Eventually, I think we would want the zoning code to be within the entire code of ordinances for Sawyer County. If we take our time and think about how we want that to look and what we want it to do, I think we would be well served. And so if you're looking for a recommendation from legal counsel, it would be that at this time we pull it over as an appendix in the Muni Code with an eye toward eventually incorporating the zoning code into the entire code of ordinances on Muni Code.
Yeah, thanks to both Andys. So we've been in discussion with this, from the first mention of Muni Code, and it was decided pretty early on to, because of those reasons you listed, to keep it as an appendix. Not so much because of the concern over town approval, but because of the familiarity with the current codes by, not only us on the committee and the administrator and the zoning staff, but the general public. So it would change every single code number on zoning if we put it into the body of the Muni Code. And we've had quite a few discussions on this, and I think everybody here agreed that that made the most sense, and that's why we went with that. So I hear what you're saying, that you think ultimately in the future it should, be included, but me personally, I'm not convinced that there's a justifiable reason for it to ever be included in the main body and not kept as an appendix. That's my opinion on it. So is there any, says discuss some possible action. What action would we need to take on this?
I think it's, yeah, and go ahead.
I was going to say that it would be a recommendation to the county board and county administrator. And because ultimately, I think it is up to the board and the administrator as it relates to these ordinances.
And I
So-
think what the chairman just said, if you want to make that a motion or
Mhm.
that's the recommendation, that would be appropriate.
Correct.
To keep it as an appendix?
Yes. I mean, if that's your recommendation, that's what I was looking for.
So what if we don't have a motion? I mean, either way, if we do nothing, it's going to stay in the appendix. If we make a motion to keep it as an appendix, it's going to stay as an appendix. So whether we make a motion or not, nothing will change. The only way it would change is if there was a motion to put it in the body of the Muni Code and that was approved.
And let me just interject and say, even that would be a recommendation, because I don't think this committee controls that decision necessarily. All the motion would be at this point is a public declaration of this committee's recommendation. That's all it is. You're right, though. You don't need a motion in order to do that. We've heard the discussion, but if you want to go on record as saying keep it in the appendix, then make the motion.
Okay, so I've been doing a lot of talking. Let me see what the rest of the committee has to say on this.
I believe as long as the zoning is in the appendix, it's there. It's there for the people to read. So my recommendation is that I will make a motion to approve keeping the ordinance, zoning ordinance in the appendix at this time.
Sounds good. We have a motion by Mr. Buckholz to keep the zoning ordinance fully in. It will be in the Mina code, but listed in the appendix.
I'll second that.
And we have a second by Ms. Hessel. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Maester, do you have any comments on this?
I was going to second it, but not me.
Yeah, we have a motion by Mr. Buckholz, second by Ms. Hessel. This is the committee's recommendation for keeping the zoning ordinance in the appendix of Mina code. Any further discussion? Do we need to read?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
just want to make it aware to the committee that I was one of them that suggested that it come back to the zoning committee. And I asked Mr. Alvarado, and I think Ms. Zomer did too, to bring it back to this committee so we can have our input on it, because that's where it should come from, the zoning.
Can I have a definition of why we would ask Mrs. Zilmer's input? She's
Well, that's.
she's not legal counsel
No,
or,
no,
okay.
but I know she talked to Andy also, so I'm just putting that in there, Stacy. I understand what you're saying. But I'm the one that just thought we should come back, and because it was an admin, to come back to the zoning committee, because that was the committee of jurisdiction for the zoning, so.
Thank you for
It's not-
clarifying. I was just trying to figure
That's
out
fine, but-
why we used Mrs. Zilmer as a resource. So I was.
Okay, I'm not sure if we need one, but let's do a roll call vote, Kathy, if you don't mind. This is for the approval of keeping, or recommendation, I don't know if it's approval, recommendation to keep the zoning ordinance in as an appendix.
Stacy Hessel,
Yes.
Ron Buckholz.
Yes.
Jesse Betcher,
Yes,
Michael Maestri.
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor.
all right.
All right, item D, this is for closed session on the Pink Road property. This is subject to chapter 19.85, parent 1, parent G of the Wisconsin State Statutes, to confer with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved. At this time, we'll ask the members of the audience to please leave the courtroom.
We,
We could, before they do that,
Oh, yes.
could we get a member of the committee to read the motion, please? And then get a second, and then we'll do roll call.
yes,
vote
thank
and
you.
ask the public. Yep.
yeah, we need looking for a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Hessel, second by Mr. Buckholz. Any further discussion? For this, we do need a roll call vote.
Oh, we do. Oops, sorry. Jesse Betcher.
Yes.
Michael Maestri.
Yes.
Stacy Hessel.
Yes.
Ron Buckholz.
Yes.
Thank you.
Clarification, since Mr. Maestri is online, how do we know his environment is secure for a closed session?
Yeah, we'll take care of that as soon as the public,
And may I excuse myself to use the ladies' room really quick?
yeah.
Okay, I have 3 minutes, I know.
Shut the door.
I have 3 minutes, I got you.
Doug, good luck to you, bud. All right. It's always better to be lucky than to be good. Exactly. See you all next month. All right.
Yeah, so Mr. Maestri, while the public is clearing out, if you can just confirm that there's nobody in proximity that can see your screen or hear hear your speakers of us in this closed session.
I so confirm.
Okay, thanks. And we're just,
Because you don't even need to take minutes on this.
we're stop recording.
Yes, he can.
Yeah, Andy Alvarado can stand and,
And Andy Phillips, and then we'll wait for Stacy to come
right,
back.
but there's nobody else on except the Andys and Michael.
I got a
and-
question too.
Who made the motion to come out of closed
Ms. Hessel.
I did, yeah.
and then seconded?
Yeah, and it was a unanimous vote 4-0.
Yeah, so Hessel motion to come out of closed. Buckholz, second?
Buckhold second, yeah.
Buckholz, second. Unanimous.
Okay, we are back in open session. I will advise that no action was taken in closed session, which brings us to item 5E. Any other business that may come before the committee? Is there any other comments? Mr. Maestri, do you have any other comments for the committee? Okay. All right, if there is nothing else and nothing from legal or Jay or Kathy, then we are adjourned.
Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Yes, you as well. Thanks.
Have a good Thanksgiving, Andy.
Thank you. You as well. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.